Ciao a tutti, welcome back to Felinésse. I'm your host, Melissa Mezzalira, founder of CatsEssentials. In today's episodes, we're exploring something I think many of us feel in our hearts, the deep protective love we have for our cats and how that instinct to nurture them has evolved into what we now call mother pet parenting. Over the years, the term pet parenting has become part of everyday language. More and more people refer to their pets as family and to themselves as parents or caregivers. So clearly something broader is happening. The way we talk about our companion animals is shifting. The way we understand their place in our lives is shifting. So today I'm joined by evolutionary anthropologist, Dr. Shelly Volsche, a leading researcher examining one of the most fascinating cultural changes of our time, the rise of pet parenting, and how caregiving towards companion animals reflects a broader cultural and demographic trends. Her work has been published in peer-reviewed journals and international collaborations explaining pet parenting, caregiving identity, and the evolutionary root of human-animal attachment. Her research helps us understand not just that we love our pets, but why that love is becoming more visible, more normalized, and more culturally significant. Shelly, welcome. I am really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So let's begin with a bigger picture. Why now? Why does it feel like pet parenting has become so visible and normalized in our society at this moment?
I think part of that is stemming from the fact that there's more of us doing it. So as the number of people who are choosing to kind of apply their parenting strategies, their parenting nurturing behaviors towards their companion animals, it becomes visible when more people are doing it, more people are talking about it. We have Facebook pages of people's pets having their own page talking about their mom or their dad or their spare human, right? And so I think that visibility, especially in this online imagined community type of space, is really bringing to light something that has been inkling embers of it there in human history all along. But now it's just much more visible because we have that international quick think space that we can share our experiences through social media and through podcasts like this where we're in completely different states and different rooms and can still have a real-time conversation.
Right. It is about like sharing our experiences with other cat parents. And so do you see this also as connected to like some demographic shifts maybe or something even larger?
Definitely. So, one of the things that we've been finding as we look at different cultures and the practice is that it does seem to be showing up in cultures that have experienced what we call the second demographic transition. So, the first transition is really that time period where we went from agricultural, very self-sufficient farming communities into the Industrial Revolution. The mode of production shifting into these urban centers. And now we're having, a lot of places are moving out of that industrial phase into a much higher tech post-industrial modernity is the way that a lot of anthropologists would phrase it. And so along with that, we're seeing lower fertility rates. So on average, women are having significantly fewer children. And in what my research is finding is that many couples are just choosing not to have children altogether, and instead they're investing in their pets, right? Their pets become their kids, and not in that like weird, I don't realize they're not really a human child, right? But in a really truly meaningful bonding fashion that I think that the word pet parenting has just kind of become shorthand because those deep relationships don't really have another word for them. But in spaces where we're seeing increased education, in spaces where we see more autonomy and more reproductive autonomy for women, we're definitely seeing these shifts that lead to this kind of parallel life opportunity, life way of being a lot more independent, being able to invest in ourselves more. But there still is that deep thing inside of us that wants to nurture and that wants to bond and have something to snuggle at night. And I think that that's part of where the pet parenting kind of fills a role, is it gives us an outlet for that need and desire to care for something. It's just not children because it's a smaller investment of sort of smaller investment in money, right? Because you're not taking them through college and everything. It's definitely, though, still, a deep investment of time, a deep investment of emotional energy. So there's a lot of parallels that we see coming from individuals in these kind of post-secondary transitions spaces where companion animals are trumping kids.
Right. And I think that's a little also reflected on this shift is also reflected on the word we're using. Luckily, the term cat owner or pet owner is kind of losing power right now towards maybe pet parent or pet caregiver. And I have to say this openly, I never loved that term cat owner because I think it's so transactional. It's like a possession. And that's never how I've experienced my relationship with my cats or my pets in general. I actually refer to them as my babies. So, with that comes a lot of the responsibility, like you were mentioning. Yes, it might be perhaps cheaper than a human baby, but it's still a big responsibility. There is our sense of protectiveness towards them, the emotional investment. And so I think that shift in language reflects something much bigger. So from your perspective, does language shape how we relate to pets, or is the language simply finally catching up to how people already feel?
Well, the anthropologist in me has to lean on the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which argues that our language shapes our perceptions. So there is probably something to be said for the word is out there, and so people are saying, well, I most closely align with, pet parent versus pet owner versus pet guardian. And so there's probably some of that happening. But I think that if we look back, I mean, our earliest cave drawings weren't of each other. They were of other animals. They were of the cats and the bears and the rhinoceros and all the horses that were running around us. So this idea that we've kind of had a kinship to other animals has been there for a long time. I think that we probably started to see the use of the word pet parent happening like in the 70s and 80s a little bit in academic spaces. The idea that pets could be something more than just a tool or, some people would say parasite because of how much they need from us. But in reality, what we've seen over time is this shift towards the relationship itself has really changed a lot. And so I think you've got two things going on. You've got the people who, oh yeah, pet parenting, that kind of describes me. And then once they attach that label, they start to behave in certain ways. But again, you have a population of people who are like, parent is the best I can come up with. Nothing else really kind of defines the bond that I have with my companion animal. And yet at the same time, they almost don't want to use the word parent because isn't the same relationship, but it is the same relationship. It's kind of weird. So I've been having this conversation with a friend of mine who also does research in human animal bond. And we both didn't have children. We have animals instead. And we're both like, it's a parent-like relationship. So we use pet parent, but it's almost like there needs to be its own term. And that's for somebody to theorize down the road. I will stick with pet parent because it's easy shorthand. When you say that to people, they can envision that you have this very involved, very attached, you might actually stay home from work for your sick cat or dog kind of relationship, right? As opposed to them being just an animal.
Right. And so that's what I wanted to ask you about. In your research, you actually explore the differences between the biological parents, meaning individuals who actually are raising human children, and the non-parents, like you study their emotional and behavioral investment in pets. So what did you find?
Generally, what we find, and this holds across many different cultures at this point, people who are biological parents tend to have they're still family, but the cat or dog is just part of the family. They're not necessarily the child. And so things like they're less likely to kind of do what we call people substituting, which is talking to them or talking about them in ways you would a human child or a person. Their investment in kind of just their general attachment, it tends to be lower because a lot of times what happens in those spaces when you have biological parents is the pet was brought as a way to help the child learn responsibility and caregiving. And yes, they end up doing a lot of the work themselves, but there still is, your biological child is going to still be the one if you have $5,000 towards medical, who's going to get it, right? But on the flip side, you have with pet parents who are not parents, particularly those who identify as child-free or not any, intending to have children at all in the future, you see higher attachments. You see a higher rate of what we call affective responsiveness. So if my dog comes to me and says, brings me a toy or is sitting by the door to go out, I will consider he is asking, let's go for a walk or whatever. Whereas a parent might say, you have to wait until Susie's done with her homework. Or, maybe the dog doesn't get a walk because it's a really busy day with ballet or soccer or whatever they might be doing. And so there's a distinct difference in kind of how the day and the attachment itself gets structured. There's more investment in, the child-free pet parents are definitely doing a lot more going to social events with other dogs or cats or with people, or that kind of circles around that pet relationship. They might be more likely to go to things like Yappy Hour, whereas the biological parents, there still is kind of this, the dog is this like, golden retriever or lassie symbolism. Even if they're a French bulldog, there still is that kind of, they complete the family, the Rockefeller picture, instead of being the focus of the attention and the attachment the same. And that's not to say that that there aren't biological parents that still have this relationship. In fact, what we're seeing with millennials is that a lot of them who become parents, they kind of practiced in their relationship with their pets first. And so there's this kind of like, well, I've got my pet baby and now my new baby's on the way. So they're learning how to negotiate that kind of space. And we did that with some of our research. With Finland and Japan, we actually looked at biological parents, non-parents, and the people who were ambiguous. Maybe they hadn't decided yet, or they're planning on being parents, but not everything goes to plan. And we saw a very clear, like step-like gradation from being very child-free pet parent to, less investment and attachment if you're a parent. And then the people who were in the middle, it was interesting. You could kind of capture that practicing, if you will, because they aligned closer to the child-free pet parents than they did the biological parents in that space of like very attached, very attentive, really involved in the caregiving and letting the animal kind of make some decisions and have some autonomy. The one place that we did not see a difference is in training and socialization. And what I think that has to do with is whether you have children that you need to not have bit playing with your dog, or if you have, your dog or cat that you want to be able to take out into the human world because they are such an important part of your family, you want them to be able to go everywhere with you. They need to learn how to be in a human world, right?
Mhm.
And there were some critiques initially because people were like, well, yeah, a lot of your research applies to dogs, but it doesn't really apply to cats. And then I'd start showing pictures of people with their cats out on a harness walking the green belt in Boise. It's like, no, people really especially people who don't have kids, they are really like kind of waking up to cats can go out, cats can train and learn, and it's actually very important for them. And we see, it's early in the research, but there seems to be similar attachment and bonding that can take place when you invest in that kind of relationship with your cat too.
Right. And so would you say perhaps that, when you're a child free, your pets becomes your priority, while if you have human children, then you have to kind of balance the two?
That is a great way of saying it, yes.
Yeah. And so would you describe that as two different expressions of love, or maybe more as a variation of some caregiving system showing just up in different ways?
I think the latter. And I've kind of hypothesized this with a few different students along the way too, of it's almost like if you can envision your typical bell curve, right, where it's low on the end and then it gets really big in the middle, and then it's almost like there's something there with the way that we are parenting and nurturing now and how that nurturing as a trait is being shaped. Because we certainly have people who I would say are on the far end of I don't want to have to be responsible for anybody but me. I don't want a pet. I don't want a goldfish. I don't want anything. And you certainly have people still who are like, I still want 5 or 6 kids, right? I grew up in a big family. I want my kids to have a big family. But then in the middle, you have this gradation of my cat or dog is my kid, or I have one kid and a dog, or one kid and a cat, right? You're seeing this kind of, it's kind of like a spectrum of nurturing behaviors and the way that it's being expressed because our modern world has become so open to opportunities and ways of, being able to like live your authentic life, so to speak, right?
Right. So, based on your research, does this kind of challenge the way people sometimes compare caring for children and caring for companion animals? I don't think, I always don't think it as a competition, but is there any maybe comparison between the two?
There are, and I've seen social media devolve into fights between parents and non-parents. I have seen, people write blog posts for different outlets that are kind of like, I'm tired of people saying that their dog is their kid. I'm a parent. It's not the same thing, right? But I think that it's really more we're arguing. There's a great book that talks about agreeing violently, right?
Oh,
Because we're arguing about these things, but at the end of the day, the fact that we feel so passionate about defending the relationships that we have, I think speaks to just how deeply those bonds are if it's a cat, a dog, or a child. And that's kind of what I think is starting to play out and find its way. It's becoming a little bit less of an issue. I think that for better or worse, in some ways, the pandemic put a lot of us kind of in check of what we argue over. But there have been some very interesting social media. I usually read them from a scientific curiosity's sake, but stay out of the middle of it.
that is a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes there is a lot of battle between the two, which I don't think is necessary. Like you say, perhaps we at some point will come up with a better term, but like you said, the bond and the love we have for our pets, it is so deep. And so, on that note, I would love to explore something that feels very real, I believe, for many of us. The love that we feel for our pets is like family. There is the devotion, responsibility, a daily commitment that is so deeply meaningful for all of us. And at the same time, though, I deeply respect my cats as their own beings. So they have their own identities, they have their own preferences, they have boundaries. Cats are really big on boundaries. So but they're not extensions of me. So how do we hold both of those aspects? How do we love them with that depth of attachment we feel, but also honoring who they are as independent individuals?
I think that that's actually it. I think that that depth of attachment is why we're honoring them as individuals. The data of having that affective responsiveness be so much higher in people who were non-parents speaks to the fact that when you have the time and when you have the investment to look at your pet and say, you don't really like that toy, do you? You never play with that toy, but you keep playing with this cardboard roll over here, right? We notice rather than trying to kind of force the pets into our perceptions of what a cat or dog should be, we listen to like, okay, you're acting a little normal. You're acting a little weird. You're acting a little different than usual. Are you feeling okay? We might notice things related to, behavioral shifts for medical needs a little bit more. We pay attention to not liking foods. When my elderly pug was still with us, I couldn't tell you how many times I bought different foods just trying to figure out what was going to not make her. She'd have this like, ooh, that doesn't smell. I don't think I want to eat that smell like face, right? So I would pay attention to that instead of just going, well, she's not eating. And I think that that's really it is when we care that much about another being, and this would be cats, dogs, children, or even our partners, we start to want to honor their authentic or autonomous self and give them the space to be who they are. That's part of why we love them. With cats and dogs, I think that's really how we get some of our best lessons from them, is when we're listening to their preferences and slowing down and enjoying. Wow, you don't like tug, but you will play ball all day long. Great, right? You don't like the catnip toy, but you love chasing the feather. I'm learning so much about you by slowing down and paying attention. And it's harder to do that when you have children. So I guess it wouldn't surprise me really that we see it much more in non-parents.
Right. Well, I love what you just explained there because it's true. Like, I do see the difference. For example, when I was little, with my family in Italy, we always had pets. We have dogs, cats, all kinds of animals. And yes, we did love them. We did take care of them and all of that, but it wasn't the same feeling that I have, the same kind of attachment that I have today with my two cats. And perhaps it is because I am a cat mom. I don't have human children. But I do feel that I'm really paying attention to every single detail that I can to make sure, that they have everything they need, that they are happy. Or, as far as difficult to know sometimes if they're not feeling well, because they're good on hiding that, but doing my best to really read them through their language, because that's what is important to try to understand their language, not just looking at as small humans.
Hmm. I did a paper with a someone I knew from grad school during the pandemic. I mean, a lot of us scholars were like, we got time. People are sitting at home. Let's find ways to do surveys. And one of the things that we found was that people who had cats were actually surprised because up until that point, we had people who were investing in doing things like walking their cats on harness and stuff, but that was a minority of the group. And then with the pandemic, people were stuck home with their cats and they were watching and paying attention and they were surprised in the survey they're reporting like I didn't realize my cat wanted to spend time with me. I didn't realize my cat was so active or that they would be so engaging. And so I think that in some ways that also helped a lot of people kind of shift into cats are not as independent and
Aloof.
solo.
Yeah,
Aloof,
yeah,
yes.
yes, yes, that's the term.
They are
Yeah,
definitely more selective than dogs in a lot of ways.
yeah.
But I mean, they still have a lot of personality and variation. And like you said, preferences and things that we can pay attention to and enrich their lives accordingly.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I actually coined myself 2021, the year of the cat, when the pandemic happened. That finally, I say, finally, people are realizing that cats need us too.
Yes, yes.
Yes, they're independent and all of that, but they do have a strong attachment to us. So that was wonderful to see happening. So we're also seeing this cultural shift reflected in policy, for example, through stronger animal protection laws or even the consideration of pets in family disputes now. We're finally seeing courts that considering what's best for the pet's well-being rather than simply being treated as property. And so I think that these changes suggest that society is increasingly recognizing companion animals as more than property. Do you see these legal changes as a culture reflecting how integrated pets have now become in our concept of family?
I do, partially because yes, the people who are divorcing or whatever, you're going to have a deeper conversation than who has the yard for the dog, right? There's going to be a lot more about who's invested in other ways as part of those conversations, or which one of you. s- Yeah, there's a little bit of who spent the most on veterinary bills, but sometimes that comes more from a like you were willing to invest on that kidney surgery or whatever. But also, I think that when our lived practice is no longer like when our legal system, when our employment and benefits, right, when these things don't keep up with our lived experiences, then they have to shift because people start pushing that boundary to get it shifted. It was 2009 when the American Bar Association was first writing about people are starting to actually come to their divorce hearings looking for custody trials and, placement and visitation for their pets, not just their kids. And so even then we were starting to see like people are starting to make a requirement. They're starting to make the shift. There are places like Zappos that actually have I don't know if they still do, but they at one point they had like a dog daycare facility at their offices in Las Vegas so that people could bring their dogs to visit, bring their dogs on site when they were working a half day, or be able to come down and visit their animals during lunch breaks and things like this, as understanding that it's, potentially better for them if they're asocial. Not all dogs and cats want to be around others. Um, But at the same point, it's also then a benefit for the people, because if you don't have to worry about trying to drive home 20 minutes to let the dog out and then drive 20 minutes back and lose your lunch, you have better welfare, which means you're going to be more productive. And so I think that as people see and understand that, those of us who are investing deeply, those of us who identify as pet parents are willing to make concessions, are willing to use our sick day, are willing to forego our own new insert item here because our dog or cat needs something. To the extreme, we even see it with people who will forego their own medications and medical care in order to ensure that their pet can have veterinary care, can have, you know, prescription food or whatever it is they need. And I think that the reverse then happens is our legal systems and everything starts to look and say, okay, we need to meet these needs either to stand out as an employer people want to work with or to, drive an industry forward. It was 1998, 99 when we started seeing companies that make pacifiers and things for children, shifting some of their products to be for cats and dogs instead. A lot of the pet slings and things we see now actually started out for infants. So I think it's finally happening where our industries and capitalism itself is catching up to the fact that we are very invested and we're here and there's a lot of us.
Right, right. And so on that note, like if you look ahead, let's say 10 or 20 years, where do you think this is heading? Are we just at the beginning of redefining how society understands family and our relationship with companion animals?
I think that there is an echo of that happening. And the reason I say that is because we've had some really interesting shifts in the world over the last year and a half. And so it's hard to say if a snapback is going to cause any of the expectations that pet parents have to also be rolled back. However, thinking bigger term, thinking 10, 20 years, I do think we're going to start to see things like paternity leave. We've already seen a few companies around the world offer something like it, right? If obviously if you have a child, you have reasons that you need to stay home and heal, but both parents have the opportunity to stay home. If you adopt a child, if you turn in, if you become a foster parent, there's mechanisms in place to offer you time off work
Mhm.
to, settle that entire transition in your life. And we're starting to see that both for the people and for the companion animals, something like that would be beneficial. Um, People may, we sometimes think ahead and say, I'm going to plan a vacation so that I can pick up my kitten or puppy or whatever from the pound or wherever I'm going to go, right, the shelter, and have a week home with them or help them settle or get them through all their initial appointments. But not everybody has one, the privilege of having a week's vacation stashed away, or two, right, the ability to plan. And sometimes we just fall in love and so we don't plan. Right? We just, I'm coming home with another animal.
Right.
And so I think that you're going to start to see things like paternity leave where people can say, I need to take a week off to settle in my animal, or even extensions of things like FMLAs. If you have a animal going through hospice because they're having renal failure or something. And in fact, I've been following a story. I'm still waiting to see the outcome. But there's a woman who is suing the IRS that she should be allowed to claim her pet as a
Dependent.
dependent. Thank you. To be able to claim her animal as a dependent. And it makes sense when you consider that they're no longer a little $50 bag of food a month kind of a thing. This is a investment that is much richer and deeper than that. And it's interesting because I don't think that animal welfare is even a partisan thing anymore, which is nice to see. It seems to be something that both sides of, or more than one if you're not in the States, but are aware of and know that people care and people are paying attention. We're demanding more of ourselves, and therefore we're going to demand more of the industries and the systems we interact with too.
Yeah, I'm actually very excited to see that, as a society, we are moving towards a more inclusive family structure that embraces our pets. And so I very look forward to witnessing and supporting what's ahead for this trend. And
Agreed.
so I am so glad that you're actually helping bring clarity and insights to this evolution.
Thank you.
Yes. So in the closing, I wanted to thank you so much for this wonderful and insightful conversation. I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and your research with us today. And for someone who wants to learn more about you or read your researches, we will share a link at the bottom on the notes so they can have all of those good readings and learn more about what we just talked about today. So, grazie mille, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you. Thank you for being here and for caring deeply about your cats. If this episode resonated with you, I invite you to follow Felinésse so we can continue learning together. And if you would like to support your cat's comfort and long-term wellness, you're welcome to explore what we're creating at CatsEssentials.com. I will see you in the next episode. A presto!